Domi.
Hello, Carlota.
Let's just jump straight in and talk about charisma. Today, we were just talking about this before, the idea of charisma, grounded presence, and also expression versus creativity and communication, and where that line is for actors, but also just for humans in general.
Yes, I was thinking how I do not know any human being who, if you ask them, would you like to feel that you have a charismatic personality, would say no to that. So when I start peeling it off, I think charisma ultimately is a state of being in the fullness of your own humanity. And actors and acting is an exploration of that humanity through a character or storytelling. But every human being, I don't know one person who doesn't want to have the experience of magnetizing, of feeling that their body, their presence, their communication, their way of expressing, even in silence, is not magnetizing. And I think that what we are offering with Mythos, because it is about accessing on a deeper level your soul, it is the soul who is magnetizing. It doesn't mean that it's a conscious person. I know plenty of people who've done a lot of even spiritual, personal growth work and would not describe themselves as being charismatic. And I know many people who've never done any work, who have no awareness and consciousness, and yet are charismatic in their presence. I do not think that you can be charismatic without fire being activated. Mm-hmm. It is the energy that defines charisma. But if you only have fire, which is power, and you don't have heart, then you're not charismatic. You might get the attention, but it doesn't mean that you magnetize people through your being for something greater than yourself, which ultimately, to me, charisma, purpose is not for the self to get attention, is to make a difference in the world, to attract attention. And I think with Mythos, because the focus of using the vehicle of acting, which is a vehicle of exploration of humanity, I think inherently in the context and the purpose and the intent of why we've created Mythos, it will naturally lead to exploring the body, the soul, as a way to find a path to discover for each person what does it mean to stand in your own charisma, because it's not a uniform expression or a state of being. It's each person tapping in a very specific aspect of the soul.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So it's also about transmission. How powerful is your transmission? And then how unique is your fire, because it's as unique as your thumbprint. And therefore, what is it like to transmit your particular fire? And of course, you have to know yourself. And there are places where I think, perhaps before you turn 30, you're in a pre-narrative phase where you're still really learning. And then what I notice for actors is that after a certain point, you might fit into a role or be typecast or know yourself better and understand what you bring more to the table. But there's always that, we always want to have that flexibility always, right? So even when we know who we are and what our particular transmission is, or what our signature tone is or frequency is, then how do we also move from that? It gives us the freedom to move away from that as well.
Can you say more about transmission? So if we have a viewer who doesn't really understand that language.
Transmission to me is, I would say, the frequency of your output. So I believe that everyone has a very specific frequency that is their soul frequency. You can explore what it is, and it can have a range, like in music, but it has a specific tonality that's yours.
Yeah, and it's not manufactured. It's not a technique. It's peeling off the onion to get to the essence. So it has freedom to be in expression.
Exactly. Which we talk a lot about authenticity here, right? The authenticity and the authority of the soul. So you can find that, and you can also play with that. And then the transmission of that is just that natural transmission of you as you walk into a room. And I think that's also part of what you're referring to as charisma. It has to have that authenticity. But I feel like on stage we're transmitting, and of course on the stage of life we're also always transmitting what our frequency is. I think on stage we perhaps are looking for a transformation also, not just within ourselves, but in the audience. You know, we're evoking something, we're evoking a sort of shift. But the work I do is to do the transformation within, the alchemy within. So where the fire connects with the water element. And then you have the expressive fire, as you teach me, which is a different kind of fire, that where you're then expressing that out into the world, which refines into communication, because expression, I think we all have a right to expression, right? We express ourselves in the shower when we sing, or we express when we're maybe kissing someone, or if we're out in the rain, the way we receive, and dance with the rain. But it's different from the art of communication, which is where the acting tools come in. And I just spent 5 wonderful days going deep into this laboratory of choral work. So we were doing Greek choral work, and really learning. Now I know the words in Italian, but of the coro, the chorus, and the corifeo, who's the person who's taking responsibility and taking the word, we say. And it was this incredible experience of just having the deep honor of studying the way we communicate as humans, of being literally in a lab, in a container, where I got to study for 8 hours a day, like what every single thing, like voice, tone, movement, memory, what all of those things create communication. And it's so specific, and it can be intense, and it involves all the human emotions. But it was a gift. It was a gift, and it just really made me realize how much communication is something that actors are really trained in, because expression is something that happens naturally for humans, or we hope naturally, and we can go into ways that we block ourselves, from it happening naturally. But the idea of communication is, as an actor, you have to be on stage for 45 minutes, having pristine attention, even 90 minutes sometimes in a choral work, having the most pristine attention to every single detail. And there's a tension there.
Which I think is one of the reasons why this first retreat we are doing can be inclusive of writers, which is about communicating, and directors, which is about vision and communicating, dancers, which is about communicating, but also humans, because life is relational.
Yeah.
And communication is one of the essence by which we exchange in life. And I was thinking while you were talking how the charisma we talking about, the paradox is when we think communication, people think just the brain.
Yeah.
But it's also where the brain limits us, controls, judge, and creates a barrier, because true communication use the voice, but the voice and the mind has to be in service of the soul and the heart. If not, there is no charisma. There is not the amplified vibration of what we do through communication. And I think that this is an opportunity for Mythos to explore and to guide people to that alignment in whatever area of their life, which is why I think that I recently talked to someone who is not an artist professionally, but really asked me the question, is this retreat, would it be beneficial for someone who only comes from the place of believing that artistry, the artist archetype, is such a profound human archetype, to become more of the self, to access more of the self? And my answer was yes. And I think that today what we're talking about is what extraordinary about acting. Acting is a direct research through the body of the human totality. And exactly. I think that this is, so many people I meet are always in their head, either dealing with their critical mind or fear about communicating, expressing, rejection, acceptance, technique, all this crowding the self, which actually crowds even more the mind. There's got to be a way where the mind just align with the self, because the self needs the mind. The inner world, which is more female, needs the mind, needs the male, in order to fully express the depth, and yet with freedom, but also making sense to the other person. It's the harmony between the two. And I really think that this is an opportunity for us doing Mythos to really unpack that for people to have a really profound experience.
Yeah. Freedom. And we all have a right to freedom. And also what we discover when we're really deeply listening to ourselves and what our bodies are doing is, for example, also like the freedom to not have like a facial tic that we don't know that we have. You know, I've had acting coaches work with me on that sort of thing, or the freedom to not have a psychological loop.
Yes, this is very true in dancing, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I do workshop, I tend to have habitual movements.
Yeah.
And breaking the pattern, the comfort zone that sets up limited expression of the self, and expanding that. Because if we are a micro of the macro, that means that the macro is the infinite, therefore that within us is an access. And that's where freedom is. We
Yeah.
surrender all of what we know and who we are through all these alignment to the divine, the void, the unknown, who surprises us, right? I think great actors always talk about incredible preparation, but then those moments of complete surrendering where something greater than themselves
Right.
surprises them too, as they are fully in expression, you know?
Yeah. And I wonder if some of that is the archetypal energy that comes through them, that comes from somewhere maybe more Jungian, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something about the archetype of an artist to me. I've been thinking about that. Who feels, I think an artist, consciously or not, wants to feel used, right? It wants to feel that your own humanity, your own internal world is in service of creation.
Yes.
It does not deplete the self. That's the paradox. But the more used you feel, the more in touch with your own greatness you are.
Yeah.
And the more you expand. So I'm really looking forward for us to take.
Yeah. Is there anything that we could say about the idea of like listening and presence that just came to my mind? Something about, I think that we don't really listen to each other as much as we could. And I was listening to Daniel Day-Lewis talking about what the greatest thing an actor can learn to do, and it's listening, like deep listening. The fact that we have to really listen to each other to also reflect something back and to be able to communicate something in resonance with someone else.
Well, I mean, if I think of it more in the context of just being a human, humans are limited in their listening because the way they put out energy is through the filter of the mind and the ego. Therefore, what they receive is through the same filter, which is limiting. So the profoundness of listening, people who have a profound capacity to listen are usually people who are much more inclusive than their own mind, that they are more present with more part of the self, so that listening is inevitable, because listening means you are in an equal relationship with the other, and life is all about relationship.
Exactly.
But I do think with actors and actors I've worked with, it is one of the things that is difficult. Because in order to listen so fully to another person, you have to let go of control of what the heck you think you need to do and be. You have to be so vulnerable, so open. I think that Daniel Day-Lewis, when he was saying that, I mean, if you look at his acting, this is someone who is so fully surrendered, right? His conscious self, his personality, who he is, to that vehicle, his own body, his own channel. And he was, I think, talking about listening because life is responding or reacting.
Yes.
And I think that and a lot of actors, because of our own critical voice and the list it creates, it becomes the filter through which we listen. And it's not authentic. If the listening is filtered through that lens, you are not authentically listening. If you
Right.
are authentically listening, it means that you are in a state of vulnerability where it is not through a filter. It is so much in the present moment.
Yeah.
And you're taking more risk. It takes a lot of courage to do what he says
Yeah.
great acting takes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And it's being more in resonance is listening very deeply. We have to listen very
Yes.
deeply to be more in resonance. And
But
those,
if you are really listening, you have no control of what, I mean, if we talk about acting, you have no control about what that person is going to do with their material. So if you're really listening, actually the gift of the other is to put you in a state of responding spontaneously instead of predictability,
yeah,
which is more authentic.
which creates connection.
Yes. Within the demands of the specific of your character, the given circumstance. And it sounds like a paradox. You can do both, but you can. The
Yes.
container is the script, the circumstances, and who your character is. Within that container is the freedom that we're talking about.
Yes. Well, and imagine going through life like that, being able to speak to the people who you love that way, just being present to your work in that way.
I think that's when you I mean, if we go back to Daniel Day-Lewis, actually saw that interview. When you are really listening, you have access. That means that you are naturally connected to your own wisdom. So actually, you have to be vulnerable. You have to let go. You can't filter the other person through your own limitation and fear and control. But actually, it's the listening is reflecting, and the gift to the self to listen to the other is then you access your own wisdom that is beyond what you even know of that character, of that given circumstance. It's the discovery, right, that creates brilliance. But
True.
in life, it's kind of exactly the same. You might want to communicate with someone, you might have an intent. That's the given circumstances, that you are who you are, and yet you have to enter it with that goal and that intent, but you have to be willing to receive the other, to discover, going beyond right, wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
And
it's
then
applicable to all life, all relationships.
that's true. Yeah, that's real communication.
And that's real communication. Yes.
That's the gift.